would it really matter to Johannesburg if Helen Zille were to throw her hat in the ring and, as she says she wants to, and become the mayor there?
This is the biggest political chess move in the country in more than a decade. Helen's toughness becomes an asset. You know, she's the toughest person. I mean, very few people would take on the idea of Johannesburg. I can tell you that. I know that. And she's tough enough. And
guys, so I'm just out somewhere trying to enjoy the sun and came across this really interesting analysis by one of these respectable analysts I enjoy listening to a lot, Dr. Franz Cronje. Former President Thabo Mbeki cites him a lot in his speeches, and I remember I had to go dig in to know and try to read some of his papers. And Dr. Franz Cronje is sharp, and when he speaks about the polls, he actually experiments with these surveys and polls about South Africa, the future and all that. You better believe him. So now the big discussion is about Helen Zille and her move to opt for leadership of the Johannesburg mayorship, all right? And, you know, this comes at a really interesting time. Now that we see that in my last video, you could see that I had a video out there where Gayton Mackenzie asks Kenny Kunene to sort of like step aside from his MMC roles. I hear Kenny Kunene is MMC for transport in the city of Johannesburg. This same Johannesburg, I've seen the roads. I remember I've made 2 videos on this channel where the roads in Johannesburg really, I just really couldn't believe that this was the Johannesburg, because I've been reading a lot about Johannesburg, the city of gold. This would be probably in the 70s and 80s, thereabout, you know. But to see what Johannesburg has become today, I was really taken aback. And to recently learn that this Kenny Kunene is the MMC for transport in the coalition that's governing Johannesburg, I was really taken aback. But now we see that even the DA, I saw the DA rep yesterday, and I think it will really be smart for us to listen to what she has to say about what the DA is demanding from Kenny Kunene. The DA is actually demanding that Kenny Kunene should resign. I don't know if it's to resign completely from the representation of the PA on the coalition that's governing Johannesburg. But in light of the fact that, you know, this whole allegation of him being found at the house of Katiso Molefe during the arrest that was effectuated on him, you know, in connection to the murder of this DJ somebody at some point in either 2021, 2022, thereabout, the DA is really particular in that they want Kunene to resign, even though Gayton Mackenzie has asked him to step down for like 1 month while an investigation goes on to ascertain the truth content of his defense regarding his where he was found at the point of Molefe's arrest. The DA wants him outrightly to resign. Let's quickly listen to this DA rep on the Johannesburg board really break down the DA's position.
The Johannesburg Transport MMC, Kenny Kunene, has defended his presence during the arrest of a suspect. The Deputy Patriotic Alliance leader says he was accompanying a journalist working on a story for his online publication.
You would have seen that my Africa News Global has not been active because since I took office, I haven't had the time to focus on it. I've lost some journalists, journalists that were working for me. So those that have asked for jobs, I have then decided that let me rather give it to them so that they can run it. And obviously, Africa Global, News Global has always focused on exclusive news. And that's one of those exclusives where there was an opportunity to interview Mr. Molefe by this young journalist.
We're joined by the Democratic Alliance's Joburg caucus leader, Belinda Kaiser Echozonjoku. Belinda, good evening to you. Mr. Kunene has explained himself. He is a fellow council member. Do you buy his story?
Good evening, Polly, and good evening to the viewers. No, we don't buy his story. We believe it's laughable. Firstly, what is a concern for me is that in the middle of the day, he's explaining even how he got there. That is very concerning for us because we're sitting with major crises currently in the city. And during the day, the MMC of Transport has the time to visit a murder suspect, take a journalist who's supposed to be independent, if it is a journalist, to a murder suspect's house. That is in itself very concerning for us, and we can go into the ethical issues of that, but it's very concerning for us that the executive, one of the members of the executive, who has no time to at least explain to some of the residents why their potholes are not fixed, why the Lili Ngoi is still where it is today, and why half of Sandton is without water for 6 days, has the time to go and visit with a journalist a murder suspect. That is a very concerning matter for us, and that is why we are saying he must step down.
Well, I don't purport to speak on his behalf by any measure, but I suspect he may want to use what he did in the recent past when he was acting mayor, using his time to go around, making sure that those who are stealing electricity, as he put it, were switched off. And so he'll say he has been working. But let's get into the ethics of this. What exactly is going to be a problem here ethically for a council member to be rubbing shoulders with such people? Although, of course, again, his defense is going to be he hadn't been arrested at the time.
That's a big problem for us. The fact that your association with people as an elected public representative, there are laws that at least you're supposed to adhere to because it could compromise not only the office, the integrity of the office of the executive mayor. You know that you've just mentioned that he's been acting mayor at some point. Every single MMC that is on that executive has the delegation and to an extent quite a bit of powers of the executive mayor. So somebody that think it's okay to go and visit, accompany a journalist who's supposed to be independent to interview a murder suspect when the temperature in the country is currently where it is, while we're sitting with service delivery issues in Johannesburg, couldn't think for himself being associated in a compromising situation like that is okay for a member of the executive. That's a big problem for us. We've done it. We've said that when Kabelo Gwamanda was in a situation where he was also compromised, we've asked for him to step down because we believe in the rule of law. And we're saying here, you're associating where there's already an investigation, step down, allow this investigation to be done. And if you need to possibly be interviewed as part of the investigation, then you'll be able to exonerate yourself. But for now, he needs to step down.
And then I'll be playing a video here on Dr. Franz Cronje's analysis on the strengths and the weaknesses of Helen Zille taking the mayorship position in Johannesburg. It will be a difficult fight. He argues that she will need a 30% majority victory in that. And, you know, arguing from his perspective, you know, I usually like to call her the Iron Lady in South Africa. And Karabo Kakao is actually the next upcoming Iron Lady in the DA. I enjoy listening to these women, honestly. But, you know, Dr. Franz Cronje argues that, you know, one of the biggest political chess moves that South Africa would ever witness would be to see Zille become a mayor of Johannesburg. It would be one of those moves that will break the block of the ANC votes that the ANC has relished for these 31 years, ever since South Africa became a democratic, or what you would call, many people have called a one-party democracy. But anyway, whatever the case is, that would be the major break in that vote. And that's, you know, that move alone, especially if Zille, you know, brings results in that if she would actively repair the breakage that Johannesburg desperately needs. All right, that will be enough to really break the massive blow, because he's actually arguing that, you know, from the polls, you know, Dr. Franz Cronje runs these surveys and these polls, and he argues about, I love this term he uses here. He uses a term which he calls it the favorability test. All right, there are these favorability test results that he usually runs on the ANC leaders, especially now in the wake of the fact that by 2027 we won't be having a Ramaphosa presidency anymore. There would either be many have argued Mashatile presidency, or even the businessman Motsepe. Those are kind of like factions that seem to be breaking out of the ANC, allegedly, according to many analysts I've been listening to. But Dr. Franz Cronje here argues that from the polls he has been running regarding the favorability test on these members of the ANC who would likely take over from the presidency, especially as presidential candidates after President Ramaphosa, there hasn't been any favorable number that has come up. In other words, the ANC voters, you know, still have a higher favorability test for the likes of President Ramaphosa as compared to any other ANC leader where it is at the moment. That's really critical. That's really scary, because if at the end of the day 2027 comes and the ANC supporters are left confused on who to vote for, because now if there's a really poor favorability test for the leaders, then it would actually mean that at the end of the day, for the 2027 elections, it would really be either probably some of the leaders who might be vying for presidency for the ANC might have to bulldoze their way into that position. If we believe Dr. Franz Cronje's surveys regarding the fact that there are really low favorability tests going forward for any ANC member that would likely replace President Ramaphosa. And so this brings us back to the positionality that the DA, that's why I usually have been saying to you guys on this channel that the DA, regardless of these, many of the black South Africans who usually come to this channel to insult me, saying that, what's the name? I love the sound of that name so much. He calls it Makwerekwere. I've actually heard Gayton Mackenzie use that word before, where he says that when he listens to the radio, there are some stations, there are usually BBC, CNN, there's some channels for the coloreds, some for the whites in South Africa, and then there's this one, you know that this is for the Makwerekwere. So he calls me a Makwerekwere, arguing that I have no place to stick my nose in the analysis of, General Mkwanazi and the expose of Mkwanazi and all of that, arguing that my English is also broken English, you see. And I think it was a really interesting comment. I actually thought it was really interesting. But I've come to realize that this is the position of many black South Africans who actually feel awkward when a fellow black, especially non-South African, analyzes issues regarding the left-wing parties in South Africa, probably in the likes of the ANC, the likes of the EFF, and the likes of the MK party, all right? But one of the things, on Kwasemi here is that I'll promise my subscribers and those who follow my channel that we are all out for objectivity. Objectivity wins the order of the day in Kwasemi. And wherever I see whatever stinks of low accountability or corruption, I'll call it out to the level of, in Nigeria, we call it a town crier, all right? We would town cry that, even if the rot begins in the midst of the DA. If the DA becomes a party that starts to favor sectionalism, racism, and all of that, I'll be at the forefront of calling the party out to the point where they would likely be frustrated. So this is what we do on Kwasemi. It's all about objectivity. We're not about color here, whether we are black. I might be seen as a black person, in the racial classification of things, which for me, I don't really believe in differences, although that's where we found ourselves today. But I don't believe in all these differences, white, black. I just believe we are all human beings and we should be judged by the content of our character. And if I can sit with a Helen Zille or a Chris Pappas and debate intelligently and all of that, it shouldn't make a difference if that's coming from either a black or a white person, whatever that case is. But anyway, that's where we are at this moment. And Dr. Franz Cronje now argues that if Helen Zille is able to achieve that feat, first of all, having a majority in the vote for her as she vies to serve in the position of the mayor of Johannesburg, and if she's able to effectuate a repair, a much needed repair of Johannesburg. Because one thing I actually thought that he said that was interesting was the fact that usually whenever Helen Zille comes up with these kinds of arguments or comes out to serve, there are really harsh critiques, that actually slam everything she says going forward, all right? But immediately she came out to show a kind of like a willingness for this Johannesburg position. Franz Cronje argues that her critics didn't necessarily, in the vehemence they usually do, reject the idea. In other words, it appears that everyone seems to be tired of the breakage of Johannesburg, and everyone just seems to be looking for a candidate that can really deliver results, all right? And so that's what he argues that Helen Zille could likely bring to that, space. That he argues that she's tough enough for Joburg mayor. She's really tough. She's an iron. I tell you guys, she's an iron, all right? She's an iron lady. He argues that her toughness is an asset in that space and in that Johannesburg space. And if she can deliver, we would likely be seeing a DA rise to the level of about 40% thereabout in its votes, because Joburg and these provinces still have a lot of the middle class and all of that who really want a workable society and all of that. We might end up seeing a DA. That's why I usually tell you guys the DA is a really important part in South Africa. Really important. I've seen this from afar, even though I'm not South African. Well, I see one of you have called me a South African Nigerian, or is it a Nigerian South African? That was really funny. But I'm just really passionate about the continent of South Africa and the continent of Africa. And I know that to really understand Africa, one must understand the economy of about 4 countries: South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Egypt. I think Tunisia also comes into that 4. But you have to understand these 5 economies to understand it. So that's why I'm really passionate about South Africa. And regardless of what any black South African tries to say, you're speaking to a Nigerian. That's why probably we get to fight a lot, because you're not just speaking to just any African. It's a Nigerian that's actually handling this channel. And so what we deal with here is facts. We cannot be bullied into silence. Nigerians are known for that level of stubbornness. If it gets to that, that's not something that we can get on this channel. We are here to listen to intelligent arguments, argue with facts, listen intelligently, and judge for ourselves on where the future of our continent is going. And the Kwazemi franchise, I actually have a Pan-Africanism channel, one dedicated to South Africa. That shows how important South Africa's economy is to my articulation of the future of Africa going forward and all of that. And so a Helen Zille mayorship is something that we should really watch out for. And Dr. Franz Cronje is actually breaking it down for us. But let's quickly listen to this DA rep. I think she's part of the MMC in the Johannesburg space there, trying to really articulate the DA's position on what the DA wants for Kenny Kunene, who was found at the home of this Katiso Molefe during his arrest by the SAPS team who were deployed to arrest him, in connection with the DJ Somebody's murder incidents, I think somewhere in 2022. And I'll encourage you guys to listen carefully to Dr. Franz Cronje on what Dr. Franz Cronje brings to the table regarding the toughness that Joburg necessarily needs at this moment with a possible Helen Zille mayorship role in South Africa, arguing that will be the biggest political chess game South Africa has ever seen. So let's watch this video, guys, and let's have a robust discussion. Share your thoughts in the comments.
Would it really matter to Johannesburg if Helen Zille were to throw her hat in the ring and, as she says she wants to, and become the mayor there? Can she make that much of a difference if we are moving in this direction towards almost privatization of so many parts of society?
You know, Alec, at first, when we became aware of this, I thought, yeah, maybe, you know, Johannesburg's difficult. Zille is such an important figure inside the DA. Is she kind of trading down, and what would the implications of that be? Well, we've jettisoned all that thinking. We have another view on this now, that this is the biggest political chess move in the country in more than a decade. And should she, the elections are likely early 2027. So she's got a good year plus on the campaign trail in Johannesburg. Johannesburg is not in a good place. It's deteriorating. The city government is not able to arrest that deterioration. The provincial government is not able to arrest the deterioration either. And should Helen Zille over the next year be able to position her campaign in Johannesburg in such a way that she wins the city with a majority, because that's important, in the local elections, likely early 2027, and then, which she is capable of, lead a process over the next year or 18 months to stage some kind of recovery in the city, which isn't difficult given how far it's fallen. Based on our understanding of a lot of other data, we think that achievement will be perhaps the thing that breaks a big block of the ANC vote for the DA come the election in 2029. Because it will be such a visible demonstration. Should she win and should she turn it around? So lots of shoulds, long time to go. We can talk about the prospects. But should those two events happen, the public demonstration of it in Gauteng, the economic center, the home of the aspirant middle class, this once dominant ANC kind of peri-urban voting market, the demonstration of that may be sufficient to break a big block of the ANC. And where the two parties are currently positioned at the moment, the figures are DA in the mid to high 20s, the ANC back at just around 40, just below, just above 40. Let this chain of events play out. You can easily see that ANC number move low into the 30s, maybe even below that. And you could easily see the DA number jump up into the mid to high 30s and perhaps even arrival of 40s. So as an extreme outcome, you get an election result in 2029. That's the flip of what we had in 2024. DA 20-something, low mid-20s, ANC nearly 40. This time the DA near 40 and the ANC in the low to mid-20s. And I don't think anyone who's observed South Africa's electoral swings of late and is acquainted with the data, and particularly the distress of the ANC's formerly kind of homogenous voting bloc about the performance of their party, it would be a really bold thing to say that cannot happen. And the inflection point that might set it off, and probably the only one, is the degree to which Mrs. Zille is successful in her Johannesburg campaign, should her party choose her to be their mayoral candidate.
What an interesting insight. And I guess the fact that Helen Zille is the best person in the DA by a country mile, and when you want in business to turn a hopeless situation around, you send your best people. You don't send the B team. I guess that would also support it.
You know, she's the toughest person. I mean, very few people would take on the idea of Johannesburg. I can tell you that. I know that. And she's tough enough. And you know what starts to happen in Johannesburg, if you read deep into that political data, you can see it, is the hierarchy of priorities is shifting. And Helen's toughness becomes an asset, because you might think she's a controversial figure. You might think she says things that you might not always agree with. There are people like that. But the fact that she's got that toughness and determination When you don't have water every week, you can't bath at regular intervals. When the electricity is all over the place, the weeds in places of 5 foot high in the intersections, traffic lights don't work, there are huge holes, trenches in the roads. That starts to matter less, and you might start to say to yourself, we might not always like the idea of Helen Zille. So it's not my view, it's a view of other people. But she's got this toughness and determination that actually becomes an asset for her. And you saw that, in fact, already when the idea was first floated in the media that she might be the DA's mayoral candidate. A very interesting thing happened, because her typical critics in the slightly left of centre mainstream media were not vicious in their negativity and rejection of the idea. And a number of them actually welcomed it. And the reason they welcomed it is because they live in Johannesburg and they see it. And that's the thing we're going to have to factor into our estimates. To what extent has the distress of Johannesburg's aspirant established, and the DA's got a lot of the established middle class, but the aspirant voting market on the fringe of the city and on the fringe of the middle class, to what extent is the hierarchy of need shifting to where what was once the sort of knee-jerk rejection of the idea of Helen Zille shifts to a grudging respect for the fact that she's tough enough and she might actually turn the place around. And on that point, probably as much as anything else, turns the result. And if the result is what I've suggested, and it's not there at the moment, she'll need to close a 10+ points gap to get an outright majority. 10+ point gap, 10+, not 10. So it's a long way to go. But as I said, anyone who observed the results in 2024 will know that 10+ point gaps are now the kinds of gaps that are flipped in South African elections. And it is perfectly plausible that happens in Gauteng. If it happens and she's successful, then potentially what that does, it breaks the big ANC bloc. And you have a real race come 2029. And remember also, come 2029, Mr. Ramaphosa is not there for the ANC. And he's a very important factor for otherwise distressed, let's call them distressed ANC voters. Voters who have a deep and long association with the party, who are very appreciative of what it did in the liberation of the country, and initially in terms of governance and raising living standards and creating opportunities for many citizens that didn't previously have, and are therefore distressed at not voting for the party. If they lose the influence that Mr. Ramaphosa has on their voting decision, the ANC is in deeper trouble. We test from time to time favorability scores of politicians, and there's no one in the running for the ANC race, and I've no idea who its next leader will be, but no one on the bill at the moment that comes anywhere near the level of popular favorability that Mr. Ramaphosa commanded. And in fact, as I sit here thinking about it now, and under a correction, but I think I'm correct. I think in almost all the data we've got, Helen Zille is a much more popular figure than anyone who might realistically come to lead the ANC after Cyril Ramaphosa. So, my first thoughts that is she kind of stepping down into a sort of less important role? Absolutely, we've shifted those, and we now think she's busy with something potentially very important.